The wealthiest person in a room usually isn't the one you'd expect. Imagine walking through the halls of a local high school every morning. One teacher has been there for decades. He drives the same dependable car he's owned for years, brings lunch from home almost every day, wears the same simple clothes. Nobody thinks much about him. Let's call him Oliver. To his colleagues, Oliver seems like an ordinary chemistry teacher, someone who lives comfortably, but probably isn't earning very much. Then just before he retires, people discover something almost by accident. Oliver has quietly built a net worth of more than $1 million. No flashy lifestyle, no luxury cars, no expensive watches. No one saw it coming. Now compare him to Ethan. Over those same 30 years, Ethan earned far more money than Oliver ever did. He upgraded his car every few years, bought a bigger house as his salary increased, celebrated every promotion with a slightly nicer lifestyle. From the outside, Ethan looked like the wealthy one, but behind the scenes, the picture was very different. He still had debt. His retirement savings were far smaller than people assumed, and despite decades of earning a great income, financial freedom always seemed just out of reach. How can someone earning less finish with more? That's one of the biggest misconceptions about money. Most people believe becoming wealthy starts with earning a huge salary, but salary and wealth aren't the same thing. One is money that passes through your hands. The other is money that stays there. If you enjoy videos that break down the psychology behind wealth and the habits that quietly separate millionaires from everyone else, consider subscribing. On this channel, we focus on practical financial ideas that are built for the long run. Here's what surprised me when I started looking at the data. Most millionaires don't look like millionaires. They aren't trying to impress anyone. In fact, many live so normally that you'd never guess how much they've accumulated. And once Oliver understood the difference between looking wealthy and actually becoming wealthy, everything else started to make sense. For years, Ethan believed the same thing most people do. A higher income automatically meant a higher net worth. It seems obvious. If you earn more, you should end up with more. But that's not what actually happens. Income and wealth are two completely different things. Income is what you earn. Wealth is what you keep. That's why Oliver quietly became a millionaire, while Ethan, despite earning much more, struggled to build lasting financial security. When researchers studied thousands of American millionaires, they found something surprising. Most weren't celebrities, most didn't inherit large fortunes, and many never earned extraordinary salaries during their careers. Instead, they followed the same pattern year after year. They spent less than they earned, they invested consistently, and they gave their money time to grow. Oliver did exactly that. Every time he received a raise, he didn't immediately look for a nicer car or a bigger house. He increased the amount that automatically went into his investments. Sometimes it wasn't much, just a little more each year. But after decades, those small increases became enormous. Ethan's raises followed a different path. A higher car payment, a larger mortgage, more expensive habits that slowly became normal. Nothing felt irresponsible on its own. But every raise disappeared into a more expensive lifestyle before it ever had the chance to build wealth. That's why looking wealthy and being wealthy are often opposites. The people with the nicest lifestyles aren't always the ones with the largest net worth. In fact, many truly wealthy people look surprisingly ordinary. They don't feel the need to prove anything, and because their goal isn't to look successful today, it's to become financially independent tomorrow. Oliver understood something Ethan didn't. Money only changes your future if you keep enough of it long enough for it to grow. And that growth depends on one thing more than almost anything else: time. The earlier your money starts working, the less work you have to do yourself. That's where the real difference between Oliver and Ethan begins. Once Oliver understood that wealth was about keeping money, he discovered something even more important. Keeping it wasn't enough. He had to give it time. Most people dramatically underestimate what a few decades of consistent investing can do. They assume becoming a millionaire requires picking the perfect stock, or building a hugely successful business. For some people, that's true, but for many, it's something much less exciting. Regular investing. Year after year. Oliver wasn't trying to outsmart the market. He simply invested in broadly diversified, low-cost funds and kept adding to them whenever he could. Then he left them alone. That last part is harder than it sounds. When markets fall, fear tells people to sell. When markets surge, excitement convinces them to chase whatever has already gone up the most. Oliver ignored both. He understood that short-term movements were simply part of long-term investing. History has shown that broad stock markets have delivered strong, long-term returns over many decades, even though individual years can be unpredictable. The people who benefit the most are often the ones who stay invested through both the good times and the bad. Time does most of the work. Imagine two people investing the same amount every month. One starts at 30, the other waits until 40. The second person has to save dramatically more every month just to have a chance of catching up. Not because they're making worse investments, but because they lost 10 years of compounding. That's the part many people miss. Compounding doesn't reward brilliance. It rewards patience. And Oliver knew something else. The market's biggest recovery days often arrive shortly after its worst declines. The people who panic and sell during difficult moments frequently miss the rebound that follows. So instead of trying to predict what would happen next, Oliver focused on something he could control. He kept investing, month after month, year after year, because he realized wealth wasn't built by making perfect decisions every week. It was built by making one good decision and repeating it long enough for time to take over. But even with a solid investing strategy, there was one obstacle that still stood in the way of becoming a millionaire. It wasn't the market, it was the world around him. At this point, it would be easy to say the answer is simple. Just invest early. Stay invested. And wait. But Oliver knew life wasn't always that straightforward. For many people, saving money is genuinely difficult. Housing costs have risen. Everyday expenses feel heavier than they used to. Some people don't even have access to workplace retirement plans that make investing easier. Those challenges are real. But Oliver also realized something important. The people who eventually build wealth rarely wait for perfect conditions. They start with whatever room they have. Maybe it's only a small amount each month. Maybe it's just the money from a future raise. The amount matters, but building the habit matters even more. That's where Ethan made his biggest mistake. Every increase in income immediately became a reason to spend a little more, a better car, a bigger house, a lifestyle that quietly expanded until there was almost nothing left to invest. Oliver went the other direction. Whenever his income increased, he increased his investments first. His lifestyle improved over time, but much more slowly than his savings did. It wasn't exciting. In fact, from the outside, it looked almost boring. And that's exactly why it worked. People often imagine millionaires as risk takers chasing the next big opportunity. In reality, many become wealthy by doing the same ordinary thing for decades. They automate their investing, ignore short-term noise, and let compounding quietly do its job. Looking back, Oliver realized nobody had ever guessed he was financially independent. People noticed Ethan's new purchases. Nobody noticed Oliver's growing investment account. But that never bothered him, because he wasn't trying to look rich. He was trying to become free. And that's the biggest lesson this story leaves us with. Wealth isn't usually built through dramatic moments. It's built through small decisions that hardly seem important at the time, saving a little more after every raise, keeping a car for a few extra years, investing consistently even when headlines are frightening. None of those choices look impressive on any single day. But after 20 or 30 years, they can completely change where your life ends up. In the end, the difference between Oliver and Ethan was never talent. It wasn't luck, and it certainly wasn't income. It was patience. One spent 30 years looking wealthy. The other spent 30 years quietly becoming wealthy. And when retirement finally arrived, only one of them had the freedom they thought they were working for all along.